Hello all, welcome back to the Hand Spinner Review Spot YouTube channel. You can click on the link in the description below to go to our Facebook page for updates and sort of what's coming up on the channel, or please, if you like what we're doing here, give us a subscription, that's always really helpful. So, what are we looking at today? Well, this is a new Chinese spinner. This is the Atrium by Unquiet Hands, which is actually a name that I really quite like. I was contacted by them relatively early on in what they were looking at doing, and I really like the look of their design, so I'm really happy to have it in hand and have a chance to actually see if the design itself, functions to the level that I personally think it looks like it should. Little polishing cloth that they include with their tin here, just in the corner for the sake of it. I don't normally touch on the packaging, as you know. It's a nice package. This nice tin with an extra set of buttons, which I will show you. Although I'm starting to wonder if I've lost them. No, I haven't. This is a shambles. Dear me. Right, back on track. Okay, so let's do some size comparisons. There's the Atrium. There it is next to a tri-stubby. As you can see, the overall outline in terms of the spinning radius of these is pretty similar, which gives you a pretty good idea that this is a relatively compact tri-spinner. Then we'll put an even more compact tri-spinner down. This is the Posblade's Tri-Cocoon, which I think, again, that shows you it's kind of just between those two, and then a slightly larger tri-spinner, 55mm outer diameter, I think, spinning radius, whatever you want to call it. There we have the, what is it? It's the Portal, the Tri-Portal by Random Fabrications. So there you go. That gives you an idea of the overall size of this, and it is quite a useful kind of everyday size. Oh, I'll stick it next to the Triad as well from Damn Designs, which I think is quite an apt thing, because in many ways this is a, we'll come back to that rather than me giving away the review. So, what is the Atrium? Well, this example is in stainless steel. There have been a couple of other materials available, and I believe there's a drop happening very soon. I will put a link to all of their information and everything else below, and any other pertinent information that actually works and makes sense at the time that this gets posted. So, what is it? Well, it's quite a classic tri-spinner, and as many of you know, or if you've watched certain videos that I've put up recently, it is becoming increasingly difficult for companies to put out a tri-spinner which is in any way sort of more inviting or exciting than a lot of others that are out there. And certainly when you're doing quite, sort of, a tri-spinner is a very ubiquitous shape now. There's an awful lot of them, and you do need to do something just to stand out from the crowd. And well, to my eyes, this actually does. I'll tell you why. Basically, there's lots of different angles and lines here. If I turn it to the side, you can see you have a sweeping curve into these sort of waist areas between the actual lobes. These sections, which on many spinners you would expect to be actually a flat machine surface, actually slope down towards the tip, which puts a little bit more weight around the button, which I suppose could be slightly detrimental to spin times. Incidentally, this is 87 grams, so this is a relatively substantial spinner, to say that it's not terribly large, but there is a lot of material here. As you can see, as I say, these flare out. These cuts that cause that thin edge there, they make a really nice shape on these, and there's a little sort of bulge at the corner where these come out. Just looks great. And then you have tritium slots. I forget the size, but that's all available via the website link that I'll put at the bottom. I will be keeping this one and putting tritium in this. I didn't for the review, mainly because I thought I should really show its stock as it comes. But I think with some tritium loaded into this, I think this will actually be very, very pretty in more ways than one. Then the button, which I think is actually quite a good talking point. This is really interesting. You have a chamfer that goes inwards, and then a little flat portion, then a chamfer that dives down, and then an upward chamfer that's at a much less obtuse angle, much less acute angle rather, much more obtuse angle, and then a dish section in the very centre. So this is quite a complex piece of machining, and it's beautifully done. Underneath this button, we have what will be very much a common sight to many of you now. This is a typical bearing cage style setup, typical Chinese bearing cage, very cleanly machined, and the brushed finish on this one's really nicely done, and that's worth mentioning as well, which is that I don't really normally like brushed finishes. Some of you remember when the when the Triad first came in, I had this and I had a brass one and brushed, and for me it was night and day. The machine finish won so clearly. And I've had, I think, what else did I have? I had an Aesthetics Arrow a little while back that was in a brushed finish, and again, that was one of the downsides. This brushed finish, I'm not sure whether it's the particular factory that are being used, or just the fact that the shape itself is more sympathetic to the brush, but it works for me on this particular model. It's reflective enough, the brushing's fine enough. Yeah, it's just really, really cleanly done. Bearing wise, it ships with 2 bearings. I believe I'm right in saying that both of them are stainless steel. One of them, I think they describe it as ultra quiet. It's got a nylon cage around the balls, and indeed it is a very quiet bearing. It reminds me quite a lot of some of the high-end stainless steel bearings that we've been getting out of China recently. It's very, very nice. I wouldn't jump to change the bearing in this one. In fact, I don't think I have actually swapped any of the other bearings into this since receiving it, because this one just works for me. Buttons are typical threaded construction, and they're very, very snug. Tolerances are good. Yeah, just quite impressive. So overall, as I say, the design, it really appeals to me, but perhaps more importantly, does it actually function? You know, do you enjoy using it? Well, an awful lot of these spinners come through, and I have an awful lot of respect for how they're made. They're good quality and everything else, and that's great. But they don't stick around in my hand as much as I can't give them a bad review, because everything about them works and they're nicely made, and some of them look really pretty and all the rest of it. But like many of the pieces from Damn Designs, this one has ended up being much more addictive to me than most of the other available options. Oh, while I remember, that's what the other button looks like, by the way. Just a plain dish with a nice chamfer around the top. It's also really nice, but it has a slightly lower profile feeling than these, so I prefer these. Moving back to what I was talking about, it's very, very addictive to use. I've found that the combination of the weight, but with the sort of fine, the slightly negative taper out to the tips, has just made this one really enjoyable to fidget with. It has a certain heft, but yet it doesn't feel too laborious or energy consuming in the hands. It's just really nice. It switches fingers really nicely. It spins in both directions. It looks pretty. These particular chamfers here, I wouldn't say that the angle of them is quite maybe as perfect as you would get on something like the aforementioned Triad in terms of how your finger rests on that when you flick forward, but it's more than comfortable enough. There's no real issue there. It looks really, really pretty when it spins from the side. It catches the light really well. These lobes, when you get it in the right light, you end up with those kind of almost like a hologram spinning. It looks really, really pretty. It flicks in both directions. There's no hot spots. Everything's really nicely rounded, and I just find I've carried, every time I do a review, I try and carry the spinner for at least a few days, and often I end up, switching back over to, one of my old favourites, like the full compass there from Zero Feud, or, a stubby or something like that. But with this one, this has sat in my watch pocket now since the day that it arrived, and that was a little over a week ago, I think, and I haven't felt the need to carry anything else. Another thing worth mentioning is that unlike the vast majority, even my favourite Chinese spinners, most of them arrive, and one very, very slight flaw with them is that there's some sort of tolerance problem or something within the bearing cage that shifts the bearing off slightly. And while they're perfectly stable enough, they're not dead stable in the way that you get from, something like this guy here that I showed earlier, the Portal by Random Fabrications. That is dead smooth, the kind of dead smooth that you get out of, things like the pos blades and all the rest of that, in terms of how stable it is on a single finger spin. Well, hopefully you can see here. And also, I should have mentioned, there's a lovely contrast between the brushed finish and the machined polish finish of the button. This is absolutely dead smooth. I mean, it's just, or dead stable, I should say, on a single finger. It's perfect. There's nothing wrong with it at all. So, what bad have I got to say about the Unquiet Hands Atrium? Well, firstly, nothing really. I quite like it if it runs with a higher button. Like, I've got this set of Van Pelt buttons on this Turbulence at the moment, and I like how far away that pushes your fingers from the body of the spinner. I have used those on this guy, and that was very, very comfortable. Perhaps I would have liked some buttons that were a little bit more stacked outwards, but that's a completely personal, entirely subjective ergonomic point. It's not really anything of objective note at all. Apart from that, honestly, I mean, I mentioned the fact that the angle maybe isn't quite as perfect, but the combination that you have of this angle here and the little inward chamfer there is, I have to say, a kind of a masterstroke of ergonomics as well. So yeah, you know what, this is another one of those reviews which, you know, kind of always worries me, because obviously this has been sent to me and I could easily look unobjective here, but honestly, I think these went up on pre-order at $44. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was something like that. That's ridiculous. These are fantastic. This is up there with almost anything in my collection. Yeah, go and get an Atrium. They're doing a great job. One of my absolute favourite spinners from China, probably alongside the Damn Designs pieces, the absolute best, you know, lower cost Far Eastern manufactured spinner I've ever had on the table here. So there you go, guys. That is the Unquiet Hands Atrium. I love it. If you think I'm telling the truth and you think you want to go ahead with what I like, buy one as well. Great stuff. Thanks very much, guys. Catch you at the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.